right, everyone, and welcome back to a very special Inspired a Galaxy episode of the Old Republic podcast. We've got Cassia and Brian here with you, as always, and today we're going to be talking about something that is definitely near and dear to our hearts in the terms of marching through time and humanity and lessons to take away from it. But it's also just kind of inspirational, something to Walt Disney. This was something that he had envisioned for a long time, and it finally became a reality. And now the world just wouldn't be the same without it. And today we are talking about Spaceship Earth. So Cassia, how are you doing? Are you excited to be digging into the big golf ball at the center of it all?
I'm really, really excited to talk about Spaceship Earth, and believe it or not, I wasn't the one that proposed this episode. Brian was like, do you want to talk about Spaceship Earth? And I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Kind of obsessed with Spaceship Earth, but yeah, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's right. I threw out this episode idea, knowing that you loved Spaceship Earth. I was a little nervous about how excited your response might be, but yeah, we're definitely looking forward to talking about this because it's a ride, it's an attraction, it's an iconic piece of the landscape of the world, and it's a very important part of the history of Walt Disney and his company and what it was, what it became, and still inspiring to people to this day as you go to EPCOT and get to experience the science of it all, and you really just kind of feel your place within the world when you're at something like EPCOT standing beneath this thing. So let's get into this a little bit, Cassia. So Spaceship Earth, it's all those things we just mentioned, but what is your introduction to this thing?
It's kind of like when you're young, you're like, and like if you're lucky enough to go to Disney World or Walt Disney World on a vacation, there's, the Magic Kingdom, there's, I forget what they call it. It used to be MGM Studios, now it's Disney Hollywood Studios, there's Animal Kingdom, and then there's EPCOT, which actually stands for the Experimental Prototype City of Tomorrow, and when you're young, you're like, what is this big golf ball,
Right.
And little do you know, it's not just a golf ball, it's to my understanding, a geodesic dome on 3 legs. It's white. They had students from MIT test it out, so there wouldn't be like a wind tunnel form or anything under it, but it is kind of like, it's kind of like the main castle for EPCOT. It's like kind of like the symbol for that, for the park. And it houses Spaceship Earth, which is a dark ride that kind of takes you through humanity's story, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It is pretty cool, and like you said, it serves kind of as the Cinderella's castle, or Snow White's castle of EPCOT, right? You walk in, it's right in the center. I mean, you can't miss it. It's a giant golf ball looking thing, and kind of the construction of it and how it came to be is pretty neat. So EPCOT opened in 1982, along with Spaceship Earth. So EPCOT and Spaceship Earth both just celebrated their 40-year anniversaries last year. So that's pretty cool. And as a ride, Spaceship Earth, it kind of went through a few refurbishments in 1986, 94, and then again in 2008. But the construction of it is really kind of fascinating if you look at it. You mentioned, kind of the MIT studies of it and things, and basically they put this thing together. It's a big center ring, and then there's a dome on the top of it and a dome on the bottom of it, which is pretty neat. And it has those, they're kind of like, there are 3 legs, but there's actually 2 legs in each of those. And those are driven 160 feet down into the earth to support this thing, which is really pretty cool. And one of the things that I thought was neat about the construction of this, just from like an engineering perspective, is they didn't want like rain to hit it and then just fall off the sides, which makes sense. You know, that's not something I would think of, but I'm not an engineer. But the engineers thought of that, so that actually has like this internal like gutter system where the rain kind of goes inside of it, hits these gutters, and then is funneled out into the World Showcase Lagoon, which is out kind of in front of it. And I thought that was really kind of neat, just from a like an architectural and engineering standpoint of, you know, something you look at and you're like, oh, that's just a big golf ball, disco ball looking thing. But, you know, the way you have to make something like that is really interesting, I think.
Yeah, that's not something I knew or would really think about. So it's pretty ingenious on their part. And kind of looking at it, you don't think anything could fit in there, but like they have the Spaceship Earth ride in there, you know, so so they'd have to think about a lot of things from an engineering standpoint. So
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
if it were up to me, like Spaceship Earth would probably be a 90-minute attraction. Maybe
Okay.
3 hours. Like maybe I'd have my, Way of Water runtime and be like, we're learning the whole history of Earth, okay? Like, I don't care if you're entertained, but this is fun for me. But the Spaceship Earth ride, it's a 15-minute ride, and it's kind of like a time machine themed experience. And the theme of it is kind of like humanity's story of communication through the ages. And you kind of ride in an Omnimover type vehicle, which is kind of like if you've ever been on the Haunted Mansion. It's like all of the seats kind of move together, and they're shaped like doom buggies, so it's fun. And you kind of go through step by step in humanity's history, like say through like cave paintings to hieroglyphs to the alphabet printing press, and then today's modern advances. And did you know that Ray Bradbury kind of helped with the kind of like the story of the ride?
I did not know. You do learn a little bit about Ray Bradbury if you go in. One of my favorite kind of documentary series things that you can watch on the Disney Plus is the Imagineering story, and I think it's like 6 episodes long, but it kind of goes through like the history of the Disney parks and the innovation and stuff. And I know that Ray Bradbury is credited with doing a lot of the writing and the script and the background, work and stories of a lot of what goes into making the Disney parks. But I didn't realize that he had done the actual script for this ride, so that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he helped write the original storyline for the attraction, and I thought that was cool. If you haven't read Ray Bradbury, he wrote Fahrenheit 451, The Martian Chronicles, and a lot of other things. He's a prolific sci-fi writer, so I thought that was really cool that Disney had him help out and everything. So and the first narrator is actually Vic Perrin, which we'll kind of talk about it later, but I ended up naming a character Vic after him. Yeah. And then the second narrator was actually Walter Cronkite. And then, do you know who the third narrator was?
I do, yeah. The third narrator was Jeremy Irons. I don't know if that was a tie-in from his work on The Lion King or not, but Jeremy Irons definitely has a distinct voice and could lead you through the history of communications throughout time, I think. And, those were kind of the first 3, but now we have a really big name leading the way. Now, Cassia, is we're in our current iteration.
Dame Judi Dench is the current narrator. So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
And she knocks it out of the park. And I don't know, like, I'm going to put you on the spot, but if you had to choose the next narrator, who would you choose?
Oh, I don't know. You know who has been doing a lot of narration? Actually, narrated that documentary series that I just mentioned. Um, is Angela Bassett. So I think that she would be an excellent pick as narrator. She's doing a lot of kind of voiceover and narration work now. Could be kind of the voice of that generation or this next current generation. So I think Angela Bassett would be a really good pick. But what about you? If we're fan casting the narrator for a ride at Disney's Epcot, what do you think?
Yeah. So we have a lot of input here, but uh my choice would be Idris Elba. So I think he has a very good voice, and like I think he could really tell humanity's story. But I don't know if you guys have different ideas for a narrator. Please let us know in the comments down below, and you can like, share, and subscribe, and share, the love of Spaceship Earth. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, a love of Spaceship Earth. So, we talked a little bit about kind of what the ride was, right? It's more or less you're going on a journey of recorded history and how communications have changed, and therefore like a lot of Epcot attractions, kind of at least at the start, and World's Fair attractions. This kind of was sponsored by different communications companies throughout the years, but I think it is currently without a sponsor. Maybe we'll start a GoFundMe and we could be the next sponsors of Spaceship Earth.
This is kind of like a 15-minute ride, so you're kind of getting the basic history, and it's a starting point. It's not the whole story of humanity. And like one of my criticisms of the ride, even though I love it, like you have to be able to like kind of talk about the pros and cons. Like a con I kind of have is like maybe it's a little Western heavy, maybe Euro heavy. But I still love the ride. It's a good starting point, and maybe like in the future there's been talk of like incorporating more peoples from around the globe and kind of highlighting their contributions to humanity's story. So that's good. But
Yeah, for sure. And I had mentioned kind of the refurbishments, so 1986, 1994, and 2008. But most of those refurbishments were really done to add stuff on to the end as we're coming up with new and innovative ways of, communicating. I think it added to like a video game and a computer, like in that first one, and it just keeps kind of broadening. But Spaceship Earth was scheduled to be taken offline in 2020 to do kind of a next set of implementing, whatever they're going to be implementing next. But that got put on the back burner when the, pandemic shut down the parks and things. They put kind of all of those projects on hold. But I would imagine that it's going to be getting some sort of update here in the not so distant future. So it'll be interesting to see, what that is, what technologies have we come up with since 2008? Is it going to be more of this manned space exploration? Is that what we're going to be looking for? But yeah, hopefully, like you just said, Cassia, hopefully it's really looking at, the histories and communications of, cultures around the world, and, getting it to be a more inclusive Spaceship Earth.
yeah. And when you start off in the ride, you kind of go through a star tunnel. It's kind of like you're going back through time, and you kind of hear like, is the musical term a leitmotif?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. And the current music was composed by Bruce Broughton. And I don't know if, like, in each iteration he composed the score, or if he's just done, like, the current one. But, so it's what's cool is, like, when you're, like, in each room, like, there's like, that common pattern, leitmotif, and then in each room it kind of changes. Like, if you're in an Egyptian room, it kind of sounds Egyptian. Or if you're, like, in the Renaissance, it's kind of like a chorus, like a hallelujah chorus. So that's a fun detail. But so the music evolves with you. But after you go through the star tunnel, where Dame Judi Dench kind of tells you, like, the history of humanity, like, kind of like through communication. You kind of land, you kind of see some animatronic humans fighting woolly mammoth, and she kind of explains, like, how, like, language was a huge development in the history of early humans, like, because when you're able to communicate, you're able to teamwork and able to hunt woolly mammoths, even though I'm kind of against woolly mammoth violence, because I literally have a plastic woolly mammoth in my room and I just love them so much, you know. Yeah. But
pro woolly mammoth here on the Old Republic podcast for sure.
Yeah. And then you kind of see, like, the same humans kind of telling the story of the hunt through cave paintings, and you kind of see, like, the drawings kind of come to life on the walls, like, through projection, and that's kind of cool. But they kind of say, like, kind of the shortcomings of the cave is, like, you have to be at the cave, and, like, sometimes, like, the what's on the wall can be from, like, you know, so many years ago, so it's like their caves are not, like, you can't carry a cave with you easily, you know, and sometimes the context is lost. So the ride goes forward, and it kind of heats up, and it kind of, you go to ancient Egypt, and they invent papyrus, and it's a portable way to kind of have documents as opposed to cave paintings, and it leads to, you know, developments like taxes, you know, for better or worse, like, but that's how you get civilization, you know. Did you kind of have any thoughts on the cave section or the Egypt section?
No, I think it's what Spaceship Earth does really well is it, you know, obviously it's going through kind of, you know, our history as you know, human beings, and how we get there, and, you know, the advances, and yeah, you mentioned that you can't take a cave with you, and you invent papyrus, but it's really kind of interesting because you know, I guess maybe peripherally, you know, that like in the back of your mind, yeah, that makes sense. But it's neat to see it kind of laid out in this timeline fashion where you're really seeing. I don't want to say that they're shortcomings, right? Because they were a product of the time and the place and the skills and the tools that were available to them. But, you know, really just as you know, human beings, how we're able to kind of adapt and create and propel things forward, and that's, you know, something that's happened throughout, you know, throughout time, you know, and it's neat to just see it, you know, put out on display linearly, where you're not reading it and having to kind of, you know, just make those connections within your mind. You're actually seeing the way and those steps being made, and that's really neat, I think. Yeah. And then after Egypt, you go into another room and you see Phoenician traders. So, like, kind of like one person's, like, at a dock and you see the Phoenicians in a boat. And this is actually, I believe, something that would change in the refurbishment is, instead of Phoenicians, there would be Maori people, looking at the stars, and the constellations would kind of come to life and stuff. And that would be an interesting change, and it kind of incorporates Moana, you know, in there. Like, not like literally her, but like, you know, like the story of the Maori people. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of places this importance of, you know, the means of communication, right? Papyrus was a means to write down whatever you needed to write down and send it on its way, but it really something that you and I are both very passionate about is, storytelling and story creation. And, the story of communication is about, relating, facts from point A to point B, but it's also in sharing those stories too. So yeah, absolutely. Seeing things like the stars come alive and see, how different cultures interpreted those and, developed those into their own stories and mythos and things like that. Super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the word history has story in it, so that's part of a culture is the stories we tell and how they get passed down. But anyways, the current ride shows Phoenician merchants kind of selling goods to faraway lands. And then, sometimes, each civilization tries to communicate with each other, but sometimes they can't understand each other due to their language barriers. But the Phoenicians, they didn't invent the first alphabet, but they kind of made more of a simple common alphabet, so it's easier for people to trade and communicate. So that's interesting, and that's where we get the word phonics from, and phonetic, so it comes from the Phoenicians. And then you go to ancient Greece, and then you see a teacher teaching a class about math in ancient Greek. But back in the day, it used to be they were putting on a play of Oedipus Rex, but they changed it so it's math, which I'm not really a math, fan, but it's important.
Yeah,
it helps us, have the kind of life we have today. But any thoughts on the Phoenicians or the ancient Greeks?
No, I think it's just interesting from kind of the timeline of history, kind of up until that point. We're seeing, within the confines of this ride, kind of the tools of communication being built and being figured out and worked out by these different civilizations. But then you get to the Phoenicians and the Greeks, and they're really utilizing the means of communication more as tools, right? To do things, to start democracies and taxation, as you'd mentioned, and able to do things like hold census and things. They're really using these tools of communication now, as opposed to just a storytelling and fact medium. They're really starting to use it more as a tool to really start building what we think of now as civilizations, of communities, of cities and things like that.
Yeah. And then piggybacking on ancient Greece, we have the ancient Romans, and we kind of see what the ancient Romans brought to the world of communication is the network of roads they would build, and kind of stretched all across Europe. And there's that famous saying, all roads lead to Rome. And it's kind of cool on the ride because it's kind of a forced perspective picture, but it's kind of lit from behind, so you can kind of see where all the roads kind of originate from the point. And you kind of see some chariots kind of taking off and stuff, so I'm oh, that's so cool. Maybe not as cool as a mammoth, but chariots are cool. So
sure. Chariots are pretty cool. And they developed a new technique at Disney. The Imagineers did, because I believe at the end of the Rome section, you actually see Rome burning, and the room starts to kind of fill up with the smells of what a burning city would have been like, and they had to kind of develop that, and that was created by the Imagineers here for this ride. And Spaceship Earth, some sort of a smell-o-vision thing. They had a fancy word for it, but I forget what it was.
Smellitzer, I think.
Yeah. So that's kind of neat. As you mentioned, it keeps kind of changing the perspective on what you're seeing in the ride. So it's really you can kind of look at it, from the outside and say, well, I'm just you're sitting on this ride for 15 minutes going through time, but it really has a way of immersing you within this timeline that makes it interesting, and why this ride has been going strong for 40 years.
Yeah, and it's a cool way to get people curious about civilization. Like, even though like I would call myself like someone who loves history, like it kind of like got me like it put questions in my head, and it's like, oh, like some things I just took for granted, like why the advent of papyrus, is so important. Like, you can't take caves with you in your pocket, Mm-hmm. And it tells the story of humanity with all the senses, like, and it really does smell like Rome is burning, and you better believe that I actually have the candle based on that scent. Oh. I think it's literally called Rome Burning, so I have it, and it smells, it's actually kind of a nice, soothing, kind of smells like a nice fire,
Okay.
Yeah, so I have that candle because I, like, during the pandemic, kind of got, like, every candle ever, and that was my hobby,
That's right. No, it's interesting, and they say that a lot about the sense of smell, is that it's really kind of this it's like our strongest like memory association thing is the smell, and how it can take you to a place, and yeah, it does. It's just this added layer of immersion into kind of that time period, because obviously we here living in 2023 don't really know what living in ancient Rome was going to be like, but yeah, somehow it just kind of hits on all of these senses, and you really get a feeling, just for a minute or two in this ride, what that might have been like, and looked like, and smelled like. So.
Yeah. I mean, I can wax poetic about candles all day, but pun.
That's on the candle pod. The candle pod.
Yeah. But what's interesting is who burned the Library of Alexandria?
Julius Caesar, the Library of Alexandria. That was something else we talked about on an episode of Inspired a Galaxy.
Yeah, 137.
Hypatia.
Yeah,
Hypatia. There. Yeah, and Alexandria, is kind of the first and foremost big collection of these means of communications that the world had. I mean, certainly it wasn't the only one, but it's probably the most famous one, maybe for its demise as much as its size and scope. But
yeah. So the fall of Rome and the burning of the Library of Alexandria kind of like happened at different time periods, but for the purpose of the ride, they're kind of like put together. But you kind of lost a lot of the world's recorded knowledge when those events happened, but there's hope because Jewish and Islamic scholars preserved the recorded information, and they continued to progress in science, and that's kind of where the information that kind of came back to the West in the Renaissance was saved, and that's where it comes from. So we owe them a debt because they preserved it. So, yay for knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, preserving knowledge, and that's as important part of the knowledge in the first place, right? If you know how to do something, it's important to share that, which is a very simplistic way of saying, to the sharing of ideas and knowledge throughout humanity, or throughout human history, is a very important aspect of what it is to be human, I think.
Yeah, and then kind of like through that saved recorded knowledge, we get the Renaissance. And you kind of see, it's kind of funny because you go to in the ride, you see a monastery where biblical manuscripts are being copied by hand, and then there's one monk who's just like asleep, and I'm like, that's kind of funny. But then the music, it noticeably like changes to a hallelujah chorus, and you see Gutenberg kind of doing creating a movable type printing press, and it kind of makes it so you're able to publish books and they don't have to be, recorded by hand. And so you're able to disseminate more information. And then we see Michelangelo painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. So that was my first, glimpse to the Sistine Chapel, was literally the Spaceship Earth ride. So
yeah,
that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is kind of funny, but it's I don't know. I keep saying that all of these things are interesting, but kind of the fascinating part about this ride and going on this journey is it makes you think of forms of communication that you don't necessarily think of. Beyond, you might think of papyrus and kind of the invention of writing paper. You might think of something like the printing press as being important. You might think of things you get in through the ride, the radio and television and stuff like that as being important forms of communication, but somehow kind of lost in that, at least in my brain. Maybe I'm way off base here, but you don't think of just painting and art as being an important form of communication. And certainly that is true of kind of all time periods and all types and styles of art, but especially through the Renaissance, when you're having sort of the Christianity is taking roots, and this art served as a means of communication and display of strength, and spreading that word throughout kind of the whole world. Just this other form of communication that if you say, hey Brian, what's communication, I certainly don't think of stuff like the Sistine Chapel, but yeah, certainly that fits just as well as any of the other mediums that gets talked about on this ride.
Yeah, and the fun part about the Sistine Chapel is if you kind of look behind God, the thing behind him looks like a brain, so I'm like, is it supposed to literally be a brain, or is it a coincidence? But it's something fun to think about. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then after the Renaissance, it kind of jumps in time to the post-Civil War North, and then you kind of see syndicated news reports and kind of the industrial age, because we saw Gutenberg's printing press, but then we see just newspapers being printed one after another, on an industrial sized printing press, and it's kind of an advancement in the age of mass communication. And then you see telegraphs to radio to telephones and movies, and then Apollo 11 landing on the moon, which features Walter Cronkite. So it's kind of funny, back in the day when Walter Cronkite was narrating the ride, then it's if you listen to the Apollo 11, it's that sounds like the narrator,
That's right. Yeah, it's very meta having Walter Cronkite talking about himself, given that news report, that very famous news report. Yeah, for sure. And, kind of love all this stuff as we get into our more recent history, and you start to see kind of the culmination of, what those early things, the cave paintings and the papyrus, propelled us towards as you get, closer and closer to our present day sort of timeline.
Yeah. And it kind of all happens at once. It's we don't have thousands of years, hundreds of years, or even decades separating the next advancements, it's all kind of happening at once. And then we kind of see the large computers, which would take up a room, and then they talk about how some people were what if it didn't take up the size of a room, and you kind of see the invention of the personal computer in garages, and then it kind of you kind of go to Wikipedia calls it a cupola of the Spaceship Earth, like, and the ride and the music kind of crescendo, and you see Earth from space. So, and you kind of like see stars and like a little planetarium, and then you kind of descend. And currently, like on the ride, there's like an interactive, I guess like kind of like a mini game where it's like you can imagine different futures and stuff. So you kind of play that as you're descending backwards. And then that's the end of the ride, and you exit. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's right. You do kind of as you're going, I guess, kind of backwards to our own sort of present day as the ride is winding down. Yeah, you're given some prompts to sort of lay out your own kind of perfect future, which really kind of lies in with what Walt Disney himself wanted out of Epcot. He meant kind of in his own kind of theory for it is to be the sort of utopian sort of thing, right, where people come together and have open discussions and learn and have all of this education as this kind of utopian thing. And it's really kind of getting back to Walt Disney's vision here kind of at the end, as you're able to kind of think about what a perfect future could look like as you go backwards in time. I don't know, forward, whatever, time to time to your present day as you're spending your day at Epcot. And yeah, the ride ends and it gives you kind of a lot to think about, which is really the neat thing for me, and I think for you as well, Cassia. As people who really like to learn and kind of be challenged and ideas and things like that. That really was what Epcot set out to be in 1982. It was a place to go and have fun, but certainly that is rooted within these sort of scientific ideas and different ways to think and different ways to explore what thinking was and learning was and all that. So great stuff.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, but before you load on to the Spaceship Earth, there is a huge mural by Claudio Mazzoli. You kind of see like the ride in microcosm, like the main parts that you see like are cave people, and then like people on a space station. But if you look behind it, it has like all of the beats of the ride leading from one to the other. And Claudio Mazzoli, he actually did like a lot of the concept art for this ride too, like for the Renaissance and some of the cut stuff, which I'm kind of glad that like Christopher Columbus wasn't part of the ride. But there was some concept art of him, and originally the dinosaurs were going to be a part of the ride, but I think like rather than having it be a history of the entire planet, they decided to make it humanity's story, and then kind of like from there, like what really kind of like are we trying to tell a story about? And they kind of like were like, I think communication is an interesting way to tell humanity's story. So sometimes you have a lot of big ideas, and then they like and then it's a good starting point, but you're able to become more focused and see what you want to focus on. And I think it's good rather than like being like dinosaurs, cave people, spaceships, like it's kind of the story of communication.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting take, looking at the history of humankind, because certainly you can go to a lot of you can go to a bunch of like natural history museums, and that's kind of what those are, right? They're the timeline of the planet, basically, right? Of volcanoes and dinosaurs and caveman and into kind of present day, modern humans, you get kind of that timeline, but to present it in, not necessarily of, these were the people of that time and what they were doing. This is how they communicated with each other. I think is really interesting and a really fascinating way to look at it. When you take something like Spaceship Earth, which is literally kind of a metaphor for the planet that we're on, as being a literal spaceship, hurtling around the sun through through the stars and things like that, and to really take it down to as humankind, what are we really, except for communicators and sharing ideas and thoughts and opinions and stories and things like that. So it's a really interesting take on telling that timeline of history story, and tweaking it and presenting it in a way that is thoughtful and thought-provoking.
Yeah. And sometimes I hate the word edutainment, but I think that Spaceship Earth does a really good job of getting people curious about learning, about history, about communication, and curious about humanity's shared story. And I don't know, because I was a nerd, I ended up creating a concept trailer that, is a fan-made trailer for a Disney Plus show that will never happen. Kind of about if they ever wanted to adapt Spaceship Earth into a show, how I think it would happen is you'd have a group in the future, two groups, because the future is in jeopardy, and the way they decide to fix the past is by kind of examining how things were done in the past, and you'd kind of have one group kind of start in the future, the age of computers and everything, and then one kind of in the prehistoric, when they're hunting mammoths, and then they kind of meet in the middle, and kind of they'd kind of have some people would be what can we learn from the past, what can we learn from the future, what problems did that cause, how did they come upon these solutions, kind of learning lessons from all over the world, and as they're learning, the viewers would be learning about different cultures and stuff, and that's kind of where it kind of came from. And then I was you know what? I'm gonna have Marcus voice the citizen of the future for me, and I'm gonna have the great Dennis Mowers, I kind of told him about Spaceship Earth, and I'm yeah, and it's kind of in the ride there's a leitmotif, because I don't know how to pronounce that word, and then I'm it kind of changes in each room of the ride, and he kind of brought that to be, and it sounds really great. It's inspired by, not a copy of it, so for copyright purposes. So we'll probably kind of attach the audio, and maybe on the YouTube video, just have the video at the end. But it's the citizen of the future kind of talks about the future is going down an uncertain path as you kind of see the white planet Earth, and then it kind of turns red, and he says, our best hope is to take the path that was created one step at a time, humanity's path, our path, the past. And it kind of it goes to the cave painting times, and then it turns into Egyptian hieroglyphics, Hawaiian feathers and patterns, to a Greek to a Greek map of the world, into Paiute rock art, and then into the burning scrolls of the Library of Alexandria. And then the following images would appear briefly, like relics from the Middle East, and then illuminated manuscripts from the Middle Ages, Renaissance paintings, gears from the Industrial Revolution, the first telegram, and then the moon landing, and then you kind of see like a white geometric sphere, and it flashes multiple colors, so it kind of looks like the golf ball, but then it turns multiple colors. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna name this robot Vic. It's like, because in Spaceship Earth, I'm like, where could you really like incorporate the white golf ball look? And I was like, what if like the people from the future like had like a little like floating robot, and it's kind of small. And I was like, I would name it Vic, after the first narrator.
Yeah.
And then I kind of wrote a scene where Vic lights up the cave and scans the cave's interior as it follows the citizen of the future. And then the citizen of the future walks toward a red stenciled hand, and they put their hand up to this stenciled hand, and the screen goes dark before they press their hand to the wall. And then Vic takes over the screen, looking like the iconic Spaceship Earth. And then Vic, like scans all around and then scans our screen, and then the title Spaceship Earth appears and then fades out. And that is my conceptual fan-made trailer for a Disney Plus show that is never going to happen based on Spaceship Earth.
No, absolutely. I love that, kind of this ride and this golf ball, they came into being in 1982 to serve the purpose of telling, the history of, people communicating, and how we did that inspired you to go on and to tell your own story, to communicate your thoughts and ideas out and put it out there. And yeah, it was great to have friends of the podcast, Marcus and Dennis, both come on to help you put this thing together. And it's a beautiful little tome, I guess, to Spaceship Earth, and to how it captured your heart and mind, and kind of propelled you into wanting to see it and stories from it further into the future. And I think that is just really great. And I think that is really lying within the spirit of what Epcot Center and what Spaceship Earth was meant to be, what the idea behind it was to inspire thoughts and creativity and imagination. And I like to think that Epcot was born of this crazy genius mind of Walt Disney, but really it was a place for the Imagineers to sort of build a place that was for them. And it take a lot of inspiration from that. I think that's really great. And yeah, we'll definitely put a link to the full version of that story here in the show description. We'll link to it in the YouTube video as well, because yeah, it's definitely worth watching and checking out. And would love to get some more people's feedback on what you had to say about Spaceship Earth, Cassia.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess if you have any thoughts on Spaceship Earth, the little teaser, or Epcot, or anything in general, just let us know. And did you have any closing thoughts, or you ready to go?
No. The only closing thought I have here is that as of recording, I'm actually going to be at Epcot Center here in about 8 days, something like that. So I'm definitely looking forward to checking it out, because I haven't been to Epcot since I was very, very young. So it was not that far off of from when it first opened. I think it was 1989 when I was there. So I'm interested to go in to see it, and to see all of the the things that it has inspired, within Epcot Center. So definitely looking forward to it. And now we have this episode here, so I can take all of these little factoids and things that we just discussed, and take that with me as I go on the ride again myself.
I'm so excited for you and sort of jealous because I love the ride so much. It's been a while since I've been on it, but I guess instead of saying may the force be with you, I will say may the Spaceship Earth be with you always.
The future. Is going down an uncertain path. Our best hope is to take the path that was created, one step at a time. Humanity's path. Our path. The past. This is Spaceship Earth. Spaceship Earth.